Hello everyone, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Kathy, and today I just wanted to do a video on all of the Cricut cartridges that Close to My Heart sells, and I just wanted to give you some tips and some explanations for how some of the cartridges work. So there is, because they are unique to Close to My Heart, and they're not, some of them are not exactly the same as the traditional or original Provocraft Cricut cartridges. So I'm hoping that by doing this video, I'm going to give you some tips. These tips are essentially for people that use the Cricut Expression, so the Cricut that is able to cut 12 by 12. Some of the principles will apply to the original Cricut, and that's actually why I'm doing this video. One of my subscribers was having some difficulties trying to figure out what sizes to cut her shapes down to, because she only has the Cricut that will cut a 6 by 12 mat. So I'm hoping that some of these principles are going to apply to that machine, but generally speaking, this is really more for the Cricut Expression, and if you're able to cut 12 by 12. So I hope I'm going to give you like examples of things that I cut and give you explanations as I go along. For each of these Cricut cartridges, I've done a page by page reveal of what each of these cartridges cuts, so I'm going to leave a link to each of those videos below if you're interested in seeing what each of these Cricut cartridges will cut. So let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the Art Philosophy Cricut cartridge and the Artiste Cricut cartridge. These cartridges are basically the same as like original or traditional Cricut cartridges that Provocraft makes. So basically they all have different shapes. You set your dial size to what size you want the shapes to be cut, and then you cut them. It's fairly straightforward, but I am going to give you an explanation for how you know which direction the shapes cut on your Cricut mat, so that you can decide what to cut each one down to. Okay, so I'm going to start with page 55 of the Art Philosophy Cricut cartridge. So if you take any of your Cricut cartridge books and you actually turn it this way, this side is the size that your Cricut is going to cut the shape. So for instance, if you put your Cricut cartridge at a size 3 inches, this B is going to be 3 inches on this side. So basically in height. So that's how you know what size to cut it down to, is you turn the book this way, and then you decide how big of a butterfly do you want. For instance, do I want it to be 2 inches in height? Do I want it to be 1 inch in height, 5 inches in height? And then that's what you set your dial, your size dial to on your Cricut cartridge. So I have cut some examples of that. So for each of these cuts, I've cut them at 3 inches. So this is the B. So the B is 3 inches in height. So that's that one. I've cut the butterfly at 3 inches, which looks like huge, but it is 3 inches in height. So it's the 3 inches this way. So that's how you know. And then the Cricut cartridge will automatically decide how much to cut it the other way, because that's already set up in your machine. For this shape, again, I cut it at 3 inches. And so that is and it's always the 3 inches at the highest peak on either side of the image. So that's this one. So that's cut at 3 inches, and then it automatically sized it. So it cut it at 3 inches by about 4 3/4 for this one. So that's that. This being 3 inches, the other part is already set by the machine. You can't really change that because it's a rectangle shape. So it's going to be 3 and then by 4 3/4 for that one. And then this is a little card that you can cut on this Art Philosophy Cricut cartridge. So I just cut this little card here. So you can tell by the shape of it that the second half of the card is exactly double. So if I cut it by 3 inches, it's probably by 6. So this is, it's cut this way. So it's cut 3 inches this way, and then it's 6 inches in length. So that's going to be basically a 3 by 3 card. So that's how the Art Philosophy Cricut cartridge works, is you hold the book like this, you decide what you want your height to be on your image, and then you set your dial to that size. Okay, so for the Artiste Cricut cartridge, I decided to cut some of the cuts from this page. It's on page 65. So again, I left it at 3 inches. So the first thing I cut was this word thanks. So when you put it on here, it is cut at 3 inches. Now it's always, again, from the widest part. So this one dips down low there, and then dips the highest at the L. So that's the 3 inches that it cut it down, and then it sizes down the rest of the letters for you because it cuts one whole cut. So that's super huge, obviously. If you're going to use this for card making, like this is 3 inches, so you would cut it like probably way less than this, like 1 inch or less, in order to get something that you might want to put on the front of a card. And then I cut this shape. The same thing, I cut it at 3 inches. And so in the book, it's this way, so the height is going to be 3 inches like that. And then I cut this cupcake kind of holder thing. But when I had it at 3 inches, it wouldn't cut because it's 3 inches in height, like basically from your widest point, the length of it that it needed to be would have gone beyond my map. So in this case, I had to cut it at 2.5. So the highest point is at 2.5, and then it allowed me to cut it because then the length that it needed to compensate for the 2.5 height was able to fit on my mat. And then this just kind of slides in there and you have your little cupcake holder. So that's an example of the artiste cuts, which are like the art philosophy. Okay, so moving on to the art booking Cricut cartridge. So this cartridge is unique in that the cartridge is basically programmed for you. So you pick the size that you want and you leave it at the same size in order to get all the different cuts that you need for those pages. So in this case, I cut a couple of the shapes for this travel mini album. So the way this page works is all of these pieces coordinate together to create these pages in the mini album, but they're sized down for you. So you don't have to turn this way and then figure out what you want and like literally try and figure out for each one of these what you'd have to cut it down to for it to actually fit on your mini album page. It's already done the work for you. So for this, in this case, when you look at these pages, they will have a suggested size. So this is an 8x8 travel album. So they want you to set your size dial to 8 inches and you leave it there. You just leave it at 8 and then you cut all these different pieces on whatever color cardstock you want and it'll automatically size it down for you so that it fits together. So I did this as an example. I cut this shape. This is one of the pages in the mini album. So I cut this one here. So I cut this one and I had it at 8 inches for the size, and then I cut the Just Be and I left it at 8 inches, but then I cut this one down and it basically is going to fit right on it. It's going to size it down for you automatically by leaving it at 8 inches. Now there are certain times where you want to make your own size mini albums. For instance, if you wanted a 6x6 album, you could then set your dial to 6 and then leave it at 6 and then cut all these down, and again it's going to size it down for you. So but sometimes you want something for a project that's not for the mini album and you want the size that you want, and that's when you use the real dial size. So basically you cut the same image that you want. So I decided to cut this one again just for demonstration purposes, and I put it at 3 inches and the real dial size on. So when I put it at 3 inches, it's like the other cartridges. When you turn it this way, I wanted the height of this to be 3 inches. So I put the real dial size on, I put the size at 3 inches and I cut it, and I got this little sort of tag or whatever you want to use it for 3 inches. So it's a lot smaller and you can control the size. Now to demonstrate the Just Be, I decided to cut this one down as well. So with the original Just Be, I didn't have the real dial size on and I put it at 8 inches, and this is how small it cut because it was sized down for the mini. But for this one, I put it at 4. I used real dial and I put the cutting size as 4, and this is how big it is because it's 4 inches again in height this way. Sorry, it's off camera. So it's 4 inches in height this way, which is again the same as our philosophy. If you want this to be 4 inches in height, then you put it to 4, but you have to put the real dowel size on for it to work. Okay, I'm going to show you again with the artfully sent Cricut cartridge, because this is similar to the art booking, where all of the coordinating shapes, they coordinate together, and the cartridge already automatically sizes them down if you do not use the real dowel size. So I'm going to cut this card here. So almost all of the cards, not all of them, but most of the cards in the artfully sent Cricut cartridge are 7 inches. You put your dowel size to 7 inches, which again, using the principle, if you turn it this way, that means this is going to be 7 inches in height because it's the base page. So the biggest shape that this card cuts is the actual card base. So it's gonna be 7 inches in height. So if you have the original Cricut cartridge, it only cuts 6 by 12, and so in order for this to be 7 inches in height, and then it's going to be a 5 by 7 card, you need it to be 10 inches in length. So you won't be able to cut this on the original Cricut that only has the 6 by 12 mat, because you'll never be able to cut it no matter which way you cut it at 7 inches on one of the sides. So that's when you have to use the real dowel size, but I'm going to show you an example of that. So first I start off with exactly how the cartridge is meant to be used. That is, I put it at 7 inches, and then I cut the base, the card base, which is, you know, once folded, is going to be a 5 by 7 card. So this is how it cut it. So 7 inches on this length, and then it's cut it 10 across 10. And then when it's folded, it creates a 5 by 7 card. So this is the cut at 7 inches. And then the coordinating piece, and I've talked about this before, if the colors are similar, like from the same color family, so in this case they're both green, these two pieces go together. All of these shapes, you cut them at 7 inches and they go together to form this card. So they're meant to coordinate together, but in this case it's just these two pieces that coordinate together. So I cut the base at 7 inches, and then I cut the coordinating, I left it at 7 and I cut the coordinating piece, and it actually cut out Happy Mother's Day. It doesn't, because I use pattern paper, it doesn't pop out as much. So I would maybe outline this in you know, black ink or something so that it pops out more, but it cut it out. And then I put like colonial white on the back so that it helps the word Happy Mother's Day kind of pop out. And then this piece will go in the card, and it automatically sized down for you because it's meant to be less than the whole back of the card. So this one is sized down. Even though I left it at 7 inches, it's sized down for you. So I basically made the same card, but I manipulated the size. So I decided I wanted to make an A2 size card, which is 5.5 by 4 1/4. So 5.5 is the height of the card. So I decided to use the real dowel size. I wanted my height to be 5.5, so I put real dowel, and then I put the size to 5.5, and then I cut the card, and it came out smaller. So it's 5.5 this way, and it's not quite 4 1/4. It ends up being 5.5 by 4 because the cartridge is automatically set to cut it to the length that it needs to go if it's at 5.5. So it doesn't work exactly to 5.5 to 4 1/4, but I wanted the height to be 5.5. So you put the real dowel size on, you put it to 5.5, and then it cut the card. And then when I cut the next piece, I decided that on the original card, where you cut it the way it's meant to be cut, it's about 1/4 inch from the top and 1/4 inch from the bottom. So I took away 1/4 inch from the top and the bottom on the 5.5 card, and I set this one to be 5 inches. So when I went to cut this piece, I cut it at 5 inches, so it's 5 inches this way, so that when I put it on, it's not quite, but it's about 1/4 inch on either side. It's probably a little bit more than 1/4 on each side here. But that's how you can basically decide on your own size of card when you're using the artfully sent Cricut cartridge. So if you have one of those machines, the original machines that only cut 6 by 12, if you cut your card bases at 5.5 and use the real dowel size, you will be able to use this Cricut cartridge on those machines as well, but you just will never be able to get a 5 by 7 card how they're originally set up in this book. So I really hope that that was helpful and it wasn't confusing to anybody. So I wanted to just give an explanation because I feel that with some of the cartridges, like the Artfully scent and the art booking in particular, they're a little bit different than traditional cartridges. So I hope that you found this video helpful. And again, I'm going to link below all the cuts that you can get from each of these cartridges if you want to check those out as well. And I've also done a video on how to make your Cricut mats last longer for anybody who's interested. I give you tips on some of the things that you can do to make them last as long as possible. So thank you so much for watching, and until next time, happy crafting. Thanks. Bye-bye.